Hello everybody and welcome to one more video on big units. This time it is, again, sometimes it happens. It's not properly a unit, it is the Iraqi Air Force. Mostly, built, painted for the Gulf War of 1990-1991, but with a little bit of material to be used a little bit before and eventually also a little bit after. The Iraqi Air Force was a very potent armed service of the Iraqi armed forces. There were around 1,000 aircraft. They were somehow worrying, of course, the coalition when the war broke out, when the Iraqis invaded Kuwait. So they were a big threat, and obviously they were also a big target for the coalition. So these guys were bombed by everything possible that the coalition arsenals had. Tomahawks, fixed-wing aircraft, B-52s, whatever. They were bombing the airfields of the Iraqi armed forces, of the Iraqi Air Force, and of course destroying plenty of them. I think of the 1,000 aircraft that the Iraqi armed forces, air forces had, I think a little bit over 300, maybe 340, something like that, were destroyed. Not many in air combat, but mostly on the ground. There were also some of these aircraft were already, of course, put aside. They were already quite old. They served a lot during the Iran-Iraq war. They were a little bit busted. For instance, the case of these big bombers, the Tu-22. Also, there are a few things here, namely at the beginning, which were no longer in service, like this Beagle here, this MiG-19, this Hunter. They were no longer being used. But the majority of this fixed wing and rotary aircraft that you see here, helicopters and fighters and fighter bombers, were in fact used. So there is obviously the famous MiG-21. There is the MiG-27. There is the group of MiG-23. Here the MiG-29, obviously, the MiG-25. And some attack aircraft like the Su-7s and Su-22s, also the Su-25, and then a group of helicopters like this MiG-24, the MiG-4, and this Super Fralin. So this is the composition of this is in fact the majority of the types of the Iraqi armed forces during this war. There's also, sorry, I forgot this Fencer here, this Su-24 as also part of the, not strategic bombers, of course, but tactical bombers. So this collection started to be built during the war itself. It was one of the few things I could gather. There was not much information, of course. Some of them were painted from newspaper articles and magazines and things like that. Others were painted, of course, after the war, when nice paintings of them, those side paintings started to erupt a little bit everywhere in books, magazines, etc., also on the internet. So plenty of information nowadays is available. Of course, after the war of 2003, more aircraft were discovered. Many of them were in fact buried under the sand. Saddam was particularly concerned about these aircraft because they were expensive. Even if he had plenty of oil to buy more of them, the fact is that this was the most expensive part of its army, obviously. So and that also led to a lot of misusage of this of them during the war, because, for instance, they very rarely showed up. There is a very big flight of them, in fact, on the way to Iran to meet their previous foes, in which they looked for sanctuary. I think something like more than 200, I think, went to Iran. They were virtually not supporting, almost, which was their main function, of course, not supporting ground operations. For instance, the Kafji offensive, I think, is, besides some navy, it looked for the help of some helicopters, but in fact the fighter squadrons and the bombers were not used, which in fact, somehow doomed the efforts of the Iraqis at Kafji. So these guys were not very well used. They lost more than 300 of them, of the 1,000 that initially were in the ranks. But even so, I mean, at the beginning also the coalition was saying that we had no casualties as usual. But then, of course, some lists started to come out. The coalition lost around 65 aircraft. Of course, at the beginning there was no losses for a little bit like the Israelis always say. There was no losses for air-to-air combat for the coalition, but in the end, the Iraqis managed to put down some nine or 10, something like that. 5 were confirmed, not much, of course, but I mean, if we consider that on the other side was the most powerful aviation of history, which was the coalition aviation with American, British, Saudi, French, and others aircraft. So it was bad, but eventually not that bad as zero. So they managed to put down a few things. For instance, there were reports that the MiG-25s put down F-18s. There was also some Ravens, the F-111 destroyed. There were, I think, Tornadoes also shot down. So there are in those 9 or 10. There were some important aircraft that were lost in air-to-air combat with these guys here. So let's speak a little bit about what we have here. First of all, let meet what I showed you in the last video. So this is what I've done. There was a guy, if you remember, he was silver. Now he's painted already. So it is here defending this airfield, of course, in the middle of the desert. So this is the trick. You place the ZU-23 in a plastic base, and you fit it here. And if you look, it becomes a reasonable air defense system, which the Iraqis used, the Syrians used in the Middle East, as everybody knows. This kind of system is very used, and also in Africa, and eventually in other places. Well, so let's see more or less one by one, or at least in each group. You have here an Airfix Il-28, a Ilyushin 28, no longer in usage, of course, during the Gulf War, but it's a nice thing. It was a bomber that I think was used around the 60s, 70s. Then their airframes, of course, became busted, and of course they were not used. I think even during the 79, 89 war with Iran, I think these guys were already put aside. A little bit the same with this Hunter, which is also Airfix, and this MiG, I think it's a 19, if I'm not mistaken. So all of these were already put aside. So let's enter into the more serious stuff regarding the Gulf War. So you have, for instance, a German MBB BO-105 with a very nice camouflage. I placed some hot missiles in it, but I mean, I think these guys were mostly used for reconnaissance, and they would probably lead the MiG-24 to their targets. It was one of their functions. So the MiG-24 is a very famous and very beautiful. Also, I mean, beautiful. It is ugly and beautiful at the same time. Helicopter, but a very characteristic helicopter of the Warsaw Pact, and even nowadays is still being used. For instance, it's one of the few attack helicopters that the Ukrainians still have. In Russia, of course, it was already replaced by other more modern systems. But in these days, it was a very trendy helicopter still. 2 slightly different camouflages in color, so they were made probably, I don't remember exactly, but probably with a few years in between. And one last 2 helicopters are these Altaya. This is an Altaya. Oops, let me see if the guy doesn't fall because it seems a little bit heavy. It's a Mi-4, repainted Altaya, and together with this Superfrellen. Let's see if the stand stays put. Let me check. Let me grab this thing. It's a very nice. The Superfrellen is a very beautiful aircraft, helicopter. Sorry, and it was used by the Iraqis to release the famous Exocet missiles. Some of them were used at sea to sink Iranian boats, and and during the Gulf War, I'm not really sure what they did, because much of this information is also, I mean, nowadays, I mean, probably there are some dedicated information about what happened exactly to each one of them, but even so, it is a little bit too recent and sometimes too political for us to have that much information. So let's enter the aircraft, the fighters. You have here a pack of four MiG-21s. There is a Chinese copy here, the J7, if I'm not mistaken. So let's start with, I think this is a J7. I don't really remember exactly, but I think it is, yeah. And it is a Hasegawa model. Then there are a number of MiG-21. This one is Matchbox. And it's not a bad aircraft, but for instance, this one it's the one from Fujimi, if I'm not mistaken, a much better representation of the MiG-21, of these late types of like the MF and things like that. This is again Matchbox, yeah. And this one is I think it is a J7. It is this one here, converted into a late MiG-21 with the addition of this very fat dorsal fin and a few other things probably that I placed. There are the Atoll missiles, air defense AA-2 Atoll missiles. I mean, most of them. So MiG-21 was a dedicated, obviously, fighter. It was intended to put down other aircraft, which is different, for instance, from the MiG-27, which is whose base is the MiG-23, but with, as everybody knows, with this front, duck front, as it is sometimes called, and it is filled with, of course, with ground weapons. Some AFID, if I'm not mistaken. This is AA8 AFID, something like that. I'm not really sure. And then some pods for ground assault that you can see also here. Here there are some air defense ones, or if I'm not really sure if this is an air defense missile. I made them so many years ago that frankly sometimes I'll lose a little bit of detail. Also bombs, as you can see here in this one, and almost all of them, I think they are mostly Academy. I think it was Academy that was making these guys here. For instance, then there are some conversions here. For instance, this one has a, let me check, place it here. Okay, has a refueling air system for those big IL-76 petrol tankers. So it can be, its energy can be refurbished in the air. I hope I'm saying correctly the things. Even if I'm a very experienced YouTuber, I mean, my English sometimes let me down. So, and then you have here more Academy and eventually Hasegawa MiG-23s. And these are very, I like this MiG-23 a lot. I think it's a very elegant aircraft. These two here are with smaller. Let me try to place it here. With one hand holding the aircraft and the other one filming is not a very good idea. But well, let me try to see if I can focus a little bit better. Well, you can see, you know what I mean. Well, so these smaller radars, smaller domes, reveal previous models, older models, and then with the larger domes, you have more recent MiG-23s. A very elegant and very beautiful aircraft. There is a Sol Mirage F1 with a famous Exocet missile under it. In fact, this Exocet, I mean, this is a very trendy and very wow painting. I don't know if it was like that. I remember finding this Exocet painted like this in the beginning of the war, so I used it in the Mirage. Also, the colors of the Mirage are not exactly these ones. It's darker than this. And then you enter the more recent and more deadly aircraft. Some of them put the coalition aircraft down. These are the MiG-29, which was the main fear of together with the MiG-25. They were the main fear of the coalition because they were modern aircraft. This one is there are four of them, all I think coming from different brands. I think this one is the Airfix. It's the longest. There are Revel also. This one is a die-cast model. This one probably is again, I don't know, Revel. I'm not really sure. More fighters. You have a very, very elegant fighter, of course, which is the MiG-25. Big thing. Extreme, one of the fastest aircraft in the world. Very difficult to shut down. I think they even in the whenever these guys were fighting against the coalition, and when they put their engines to the maximum, they would simply vanish. Some of them caused casualties, as I told you, but then they were extremely difficult to shut down. I don't know even if any of them could have been shut down by the coalition because of its speed. So there are two, and why there are two, why there are four, why there are three? I mean, because it's always better to have four than three, and it's better to have three than two, and you understand. So both of them are Hasegawa, one of my favorite aircraft. Let's go to some bombers. This one here is a Su-22, and this camouflage, for instance, which is quite nice and a little bit different from darker than most of the Iraqi aircraft, is from a picture, a very nice picture of them in sanctuary in Iran, which means that they arrived like this, with darker colors, not sand, but kind of brown and green. It is a very interesting aircraft. I also have others for my Angolans and things like that, and in smaller scale for my Syrians. And this one it's one of the Eastern brands. I really can't be sure of what. Then there is the Su-7. There's a Su-7 here, older bomber, but still in usage. And then there is this one with a very beautiful camouflage, probably the most beautiful camouflage of the Iraqi Air Force. Sand, gray and green. I think it looks quite nice. And this is by KP, something like that. So one of those Eastern brands with very affordable kits, on those days at least. Very easy to get and quite reasonable. Then there are two Su-25, which are the frog foot. So two are frog feet, if I can call it, I don't know. And these are again Academy or Hasegawa. I really can't be sure. A very interesting aircraft also. Still in usage by the Russians and Ukrainians in nowadays unfortunate war in Eastern Europe. So what do we have left here? We still have, of course, the big bombers over there. So you have here a Su-24 Fencer. This one, I think it is Italeri, if I'm not mistaken. Big thing, crammed with of course, with offensive power. And a very interesting thing. And of course, I mean, it existed in kits, so I had to have it. I mean, not really a very important thing for the Gulf War because they were already not at usage. But this is a Tu-22. They were very famous in the war of the cities between Iran and Iraq, in which they were bombing each other's cities. But then I think they had so much usage, and they're not particularly young frames, so they were put aside. And some of them were found in 2003 under tons of gravel and sand. And this one is a Neshi model. Sometimes I paint. For instance, initially I was leaving the. Let me show you. I was leaving the cockpit with pilots inside, and I'd like to show. Then I slowly I started to paint the cockpits. So there is a mix of painted cockpits and glass cockpits. Sometimes you can see the pilots, other times you can't. maybe in the future, I mean, I started, probably I will have to paint everything. I will take plenty of pilots out of them, because they out of the aircraft, because they are useful sometimes for instance, for American tankers in Vietnam and things like that, and eventually in the Gulf War also. So probably it will be its future. So I hope you have enjoyed. This is the not 40 but close to 40 aircraft of the Iraqi Air Force. So this ends my Iraqi army. I have nothing else to show you. This is the 4th video on the Iraqi armed forces. So 2 divisions, core support, and now the aviation. And I'll try to, whether I switch to something, for instance, continuing the Gulf War with coalition army for the ground, also for their air forces. So plenty of stuff still to be seen regarding this Gulf War. And see you next with something else. Okay, bye-bye. Cheers.